3D Man was kind of a funny game for us. We got a lot of publicity from it. At the time, it was very, very novel because people were trying to do a little bit of 3D looking mazes, and at that same time they were doing anything they could to do a Pac-Man clone. There were also lawsuits flying, everybody getting sued, including us, because of Pac-Man clones. This was a unique way to do a Pac-Man without it really resembling Pac-Man, so we figured we'd get away with it. It was copied a lot. This game in particular is all over the web now because it just got around. Lots of people ordered it. Unfortunately, it wasn't a very good game. It was pretty simplistic and not very fun, but it sure got around the country. Alien Panic was one of our first games. As you see in this program, there were 3 main variations of it that all actually changed quite radically. The first one was entirely in BASIC and just had one monster that was fairly dumb. And it was hard enough, but not great. And the second one, it had some machine language routines and 4 monsters roaming around. Version 3, though, was rewritten all in machine code using bit masks to compress several screen designs so we could show them in 3K. It was one of the better games for unexpanded Vic because it had so many screens and plenty of play value. Anti-Matter Splatter was one of our first games that was written entirely in machine language, actually writing it on paper and using a machine language monitor to enter and edit the hex data. It was a very crude process. It was before we actually had assemblers for politely writing machine code. But it was one of the first games where I actually figured out machine code enough to do some real movement, and was so impressed with machine code on a Vic because you could move whole screens so fast, had all the speed to play with, which we'd never had before in BASIC, obviously. So as the first game, I just wanted to make everything moving. Things move in different directions, things moving at the same time, aliens getting faster, dropping the canisters. You literally could see most of the screen moving different ways at the same time, and that was the real goal for us. It also had a great title. Blow Up was a decent game, and it was a good style of game for the Vic. It had a single character moving, but it looked like there was a lot going on the screen because it was so busy. Bomber was one of our earliest games. I believe the idea was lifted from something like Canyon Run or Canyon Bomber, whatever the game was on the 2600 system, which was an adaptation of an early arcade game. But it was a fun game. It was one of the first ones of these types on the Vic, which was kind of our thing at Nufekop, where we could get a game to market faster than anybody. So we actually had games out, weeks after they hit arcades, or at least got around to where people knew about them. And it may not have been the best one, but it was certainly the first one out, beat other companies by months, and it was kind of our thing to get a little bit of the arcade flavor at home first. Clyde was the type of game that was on every computer system. We tried to add some interesting features where the monster was chasing you and could actually go backwards and chase you into things. And you could bump into walls and turn around and go backwards for a minute, just trying to make it a little more interesting. Crater Hop was a game we gave away in our first cassette-a-log, which was a catalog on cassette. It actually was a pretty decent game. Defender on Try was our first expanded memory game. I think it took a 3K expander cartridge and it was actually our first real multi-screen game. It had not just different levels, but it actually had very particular separate screens, which was of course the reason for the 3K expansion. It did really well for us, having made several top game lists in different magazines. I recall Creative Computing magazine gave it a great review, so that was really a plus and helped us sell a lot of games. Dodge Cars is what I consider the first game that we actually thought we could start the company with. I wrote it just playing around. We'd gotten a Vic and we were trying to learn programming and it was fun. and there was such a shortage of games at the time. There was basically a couple from Commodore out, and that was it. So we were writing our own games, and it came to our attention from several people that these ought to be sold because they were fun. So Dodge Cars kind of officially took the reign as the lead game, and at the time it had some unique features like comparing how you did to everybody else who played it, which really encouraged competition among players, and overall a pretty good game. Edit It was actually just a very crude tool we wrote in-house. I wrote it because I needed to be able to customize character sets and save them out, and it could generate basic data statements so you could just drop them in your application. So it was made purely out of necessity, but after this much better ones came along, of course, but at the time the demand of just people wanting to edit characters was very high. Escape did just that. It built a random maze and let you try to escape your way out of it. It was pretty hard, and it was a fun early exploration of 3D stuff on a Vic. Not very 3D, just a little. Gallows was our version of the old kids' school game where you just guess letters before you get hung, and it did manage to squeeze in about 350 words into a 3K Vic, which was pretty good. Game Time was an application that never got the distribution it probably deserved. At the time, there was just not many utilities like this that were just dedicated for a sole purpose. It was basically akin to a chess clock. You had simple controls you could use for timing games, maybe a little ahead of its time, but people weren't ready to turn their expensive Vics into a stopwatch. Invasion was one of the earlier games that had pretty good play value. It wasn't necessarily a game you couldn't wait to go play again, but when you did play it, it was real fun. Journey was a game that was just too hard. We made it too difficult thinking it needed to be that way, but it had levels you never saw because you never got that far down the cavern. King's Ransom was probably our biggest in-house project on the Vic. It was actually formally designed and built from a plan. Gary had written a story to go along with the manual, and I'd actually done a lot of planning about this game, just to figure out how things were going to move and how to control them, and to squeeze it all into 3K of assembly code. We also had a 64 version of this. If you ever get a chance to play it, it's actually a pretty good game. This game is nice for a Vic, but of course the graphics look like a Vic. Knockout was a simple game, but it had to be, since we gave it away in our second catalog and you had to be able to type it in. Crazy Kong was one of our first arcade ripoffs. We purposefully didn't try to do it too close to arcade just because of fear of getting in trouble, but it technically wasn't a very clever game, but it actually played okay. It was really, really hard. It had several levels and lots of rolling barrels at high speed on the harder levels. It was just really tough. So at least it had some play value, and it was difficult to win. But I'm surprised that we never got around to rewriting this in assembly. This was nearly all in BASIC. Mimic was another giveaway game from our first catalog. You just tried to play back the moves that the computer made. I always liked the gameplay of Quirk, the way your character would run around and do things. I mean, not necessarily in that game, but just the whole behavior of jumping across moving rows and the challenge to that. This game was licensed to a lot of other companies. I believe it was called Sad Faces in England by Bubble Bus and Galactic Defender by Wizard Software out of San Jose. It really got around. It wasn't that great a game, but it had some nice play value to it. Race Fun was an example of a game. Now that we've gotten a bunch of sales under our belts and we were cleaning up some games and doing them all in machine language and wanted everything bigger and better and lots of graphics and just really do more arcade looking stuff. So we redid Dodge Cars with all the bells and whistles of big graphics and good scrolling, and the game was just not nearly as much fun as Dodge Cars. Play value is just so important on a game, and it just wasn't there on this. Raceway was just a simple overhead driving game. It was best with two people trying to beat each other. One could play using a joystick, the other one on the keyboard. Rescue from Newfound was a fun game for us. It kind of was our first step away from arcade type games. This game was kind of the new adventure ones where you just roam around buildings without typing in directions. It was a fun game, but really hard. Newfound, of course, as some of you know, is no fun backwards, which probably leads you to understand what Nufekop spelled backwards is. The search played exactly like it was titled. You simply searched a whole bunch of rooms looking for fuel and money bags to win the game. We just sold Six Gunner for a while when we first started. It was very simple. Not too many people wanted to play a shoot-'em-up game like this anymore. They wanted more arcade-ish looking stuff, but it did all right. It was unique in the way that it dealt with the Vic screen. I can't remember the details, but it had a mode where it actually doubled the height of the character set. Space Quest was our first 8K expander game. We had two versions of it. The first one we didn't have very long and was fairly simple. The second version randomly hit asteroid fields you had to dodge, and the refueling process in the first version you just hyperspace to a fuel station and be done. In the second version you had to navigate a cavern to get to the bottom to receive your fuel, things like that. Spell It was our version of the board game where you scrambled letters and tried to find words hidden in there. Funny story, years later somebody's looking for this game as they remember playing it in school as a kid, but they couldn't find it online as they didn't look for the right spelling of Spell It because the game name itself is incorrectly spelled. Tally was a fun numbers game where you had to find three numbers side by side where two could be multiplied and then you'd add or subtract the third number to make the target number, and the computer actually played the second opponent. Tank was an early game where you literally had to share the keyboard with somebody to play it. Had to be played with two players, with both playing off a different set of keys on the same keyboard. Target was a nice game. It was based off an early arcade game. This version had real nice, clean graphics and played real well. It got really fast, so it ended up being challenging. The Catch was probably one of our most played games. It really caught on. We sold a ton of them, of course, and it was all in assembly with blazing fast action. You get 4 or 5 levels into it and it's just so fast. Because of playability, anywhere we went with it, trade shows or whatever, people really played it to death. And I did too, as all of us in-house did. It was a game we played probably more than any other one, just trying to beat each other's scores. Real simple game, wasn't hard to learn, but sure hard to beat. So here's our Pac-Man clone. I think we were probably the second Pac-Man clone to come out on the Vic. We were really early on. This was in our first product line, and it really looked the part better than most of them that were out there for the first year or so. But unfortunately, the play was pretty marginal. The monsters were semi-smart, but not great movement. Thanks for watching.